Venezuela's fate has always been tied to oil. For over a century, the country's destiny has been shaped by the black gold beneath its soil, influencing every aspect of life from politics to daily routines. Sitting atop the world's largest proven reserves, oil has powered Venezuela's economy, built its cities, and paid for public services. Skyscrapers, highways, and even schools owe their existence to oil wealth, which once seemed limitless. But this dependence is a double-edged sword. The same resource that brought prosperity has also made the nation vulnerable to global market swings and political turmoil. When oil prices soar, Venezuela thrives. The streets fill with optimism, and government coffers overflow, funding ambitious social programs and infrastructure projects. But when prices crash, the nation plunges into crisis. Shortages, inflation, and unrest quickly follow, exposing the fragility of an economy built on a single export. Over 80% of Venezuela's foreign income comes from oil. Every shipment that leaves its ports is vital, not just for the economy, but for the daily survival of millions. Any disruption to exports threatens the country's very survival. A single bottleneck or sanction can ripple through society, affecting everything from jobs to food on the table. In recent years, Venezuela's oil industry has been battered by underinvestment, mismanagement, and harsh U.S.-led sanctions. Once state-of-the-art facilities now stand in disrepair, and skilled workers have left in search of better opportunities. Production has plummeted from over 3 million barrels a day in the early 2000s to less than 1 million by 2025. The decline is stark, and its impact is felt in every corner of the country. This collapse has deepened the economic crisis, making every exported barrel crucial. For ordinary Venezuelans, it means longer lines, higher prices, and fewer opportunities. For the government, oil revenue isn't just about economics. It's about political survival and social stability. The ability to provide for the people and maintain power depends on the flow of oil money. The money funds imports of food, medicine, and essentials the country can no longer produce. Without oil dollars, supermarket shelves and pharmacies would be even emptier. Any threat to oil exports is seen as a direct attack on Venezuela's sovereignty. The nation's leaders rally the public around oil, framing it as the lifeblood of independence. Now, with the economy fragile and stakes higher than ever, a new international confrontation looms. The world watches as Venezuela's future is debated in boardrooms and embassies. The nation stands at a crossroads, its future hanging on the flow of oil. What happens next will shape not just Venezuela but the entire region for years to come. On December 16, 2025, President Donald Trump made a dramatic announcement: a total and complete blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers traveling to and from Venezuela. The world was stunned as the United States signaled a major escalation in its standoff with the Venezuelan government, moving far beyond previous diplomatic warnings and economic sanctions. This was more than just another round of economic pressure. It was a bold demonstration of military might. The U.S. Navy assembled a formidable armada, forming a ring of steel around Venezuela's coastline, making it clear that the blockade would be enforced by force if necessary. The deployment included the world's largest aircraft carrier, accompanied by a powerful fleet of destroyers, cruisers, and support vessels. This show of strength signaled a new and dangerous phase in the already tense relationship between the U.S. and Venezuela, raising fears of a direct military confrontation. Officially, the military buildup had begun months earlier, under the stated pretext of combating drug trafficking in the Caribbean. U.S. officials insisted the operation was about stopping illegal narcotics, but the scale and timing of the deployment told a different story. Many analysts and observers saw the operation as clear preparation for possible direct action against Caracas, with the blockade serving as both a warning and a threat to the Venezuelan leadership. Throughout history, a naval blockade has been considered an act of war, a move that crosses the line from economic pressure to open military confrontation. the US was now treading a path fraught with risk and uncertainty. The US aimed to intimidate shipping companies and international trading partners, hoping to choke off Venezuela's vital oil income and force a dramatic political change. The blockade threatened to cripple Venezuela's economy and isolate it from the global market. As the world watched, the stakes escalated overnight. Tensions soared and uncertainty gripped the region, with everyone wondering what the next move would be in this high-stakes geopolitical showdown. Venezuela responded to the blockade threat with defiance, not fear. Across the country, the government and its supporters projected unity and determination, refusing to bow to international pressure. The streets of Caracas filled with both anxious citizens and passionate demonstrators, all aware that the nation was at a crossroads. PDVSA, the state oil company and the backbone of Venezuela's economy, insisted exports continued as normal, directly challenging U.S. claims of disruption. Oil tankers still lined the ports, and workers kept operations running, determined to show the world that Venezuela would not be easily isolated. Defense Minister General Vladimir Padrino Lopez, flanked by military leaders, declared on national TV, "We are not intimidated by their threats." His words echoed through the country, reinforcing the message that the armed forces stood firmly behind the government. The government framed the blockade as illegal bullying, aiming to reassure partners and undermine the psychological impact. Officials took to the airwaves, emphasizing Venezuela's sovereignty and denouncing what they called foreign interference. Their message was clear: the risks are real, but trade can continue. They encouraged business partners to stand firm, promising that Venezuela would honor its commitments despite the mounting obstacles. This public relations battle was as crucial as any naval standoff. The government worked tirelessly to control the narrative, countering negative headlines and rallying support both at home and abroad. Behind the scenes, the government braced for crisis, military on high alert, contingency plans in motion, security forces patrolled the streets, and emergency meetings became a daily routine as leaders prepared for any escalation. The rhetoric was part of a survival strategy, rallying domestic support and signaling to allies that Venezuela would not surrender. President Maduro addressed crowds, urging unity and resistance in the face of adversity. The world saw a nation determined to resist, even as the pressure mounted. International observers watched closely, wondering how long Venezuela could hold out. The next moves would test Venezuela's resolve like never before, as the country faced one of the greatest challenges in its modern history. The U.S. blockade sent shockwaves worldwide, with China's response the most significant. China, now buying 80% of Venezuela's oil, condemned the blockade as bullying and a violation of international norms. Beijing's support gave Caracas vital diplomatic cover. Russia, Iran, and others also criticized the U.S. move, warning it set a dangerous precedent. Even some Latin American nations, wary of U.S. intervention, expressed unease. The blockade forced companies and countries to choose sides, weighing profits against the risk of U.S. sanctions or military action. The threat was clear: do business with Venezuela and you could become a target. News of the blockade jolted global oil markets. Prices surged as traders feared a supply crunch. For Venezuela, a successful blockade would be catastrophic, slashing vital income and deepening the economic crisis. Shutting down oil wells isn't easy. It risks permanent damage and years of lost production. Even if sanctions were lifted, recovery would be slow and painful. The blockade also threatened to worsen Venezuela's humanitarian crisis, cutting funds for food and medicine. While aimed at the government, the blockade's harshest effects would hit ordinary citizens. Years of hardship could soon become even more severe. The blockade capped months of escalating U.S. military pressure in the Caribbean. Just days before, the U.S. Navy seized the tanker skipper, carrying up to 2 million barrels of crude, signaling a new willingness to enforce sanctions with force. Since September, U.S. airstrikes had targeted dozens of boats, killing nearly 100 people, officially as anti-drug operations, but widely seen as intimidation. These actions established a strong U.S. military presence and normalized force near Venezuela. The blockade was the next step in a calculated campaign to coerce Caracas. The message ships trading with Venezuela were now fair game. The region braced for further escalation. The U.S. blockade targeted Venezuela's so-called shadow fleet, aging tankers used to evade sanctions. Over 30 vessels had already been blacklisted, forming the backbone of Venezuela's export network. These ships used tactics like turning off tracking systems and ship-to-ship transfers to hide their movements. But a naval blockade made evasion far riskier. Warships can spot even the most elusive tankers. The threat of interception and seizure was a powerful deterrent. The U.S. hoped to make oil exports so dangerous that even the boldest captains would think twice. Amid sanctions and blockades, one American company, Chevron, remained in Venezuela under a special U.S. license. Chevron's joint ventures with PDVSA were closely monitored, but not directly targeted by the blockade. Under Trump, policy shifted. Venezuela received a share of Chevron's oil to sell on the open market. Much of this oil was sold through a trading company linked to a sanctioned Panamanian businessman, creating a loophole. The blockade aimed to close this loophole, cutting off a key revenue stream worth hundreds of millions. U.S. policy was contradictory. One hand allowed oil production, the other tried to stop its sale. The Chevron exception highlighted the tangled web of interests at play. The blockade has pushed Venezuela and the U.S. into a perilous new chapter. With massive U.S. naval forces and a defiant Venezuelan military, the risk of conflict is real. For Venezuelans, more hardship looms. Blockade means less food, medicine, and hope. Globally, the crisis highlights rising tensions between world powers, with China backing Venezuela. The outcome will set precedents for future economic and military confrontations. Venezuela's resilience faces its greatest test. Can it survive with help from allies and the shadow fleet, or will the pressure force change? One thing is certain. The stakes for Venezuela's people have never been higher.